Up in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's
your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
And just like that, the Watching Comics podcast has returned. Jake, this is a really big deal.
This is huge. I said it in... Guys, we actually had a real production meeting this week. It wasn't just a text message. And I said it in that meeting. We're getting a level of legitimacy today that I don't think we deserve. So this is fantastic. Mitch, tell the people what they got.
Yeah, well, we're strapping on our big boy pants, and this is a really big deal for the Watching Comics podcast. If you're a regular podcast listener, you know that a lot of podcasts kind of boost up in legitimacy and spice things up by having special guests on their show. So the Watching Comics is here to bring you its inaugural special guest episode. We're super excited. We have freelance illustrator, comic book lover and aficionado, and just overall amazingly talented dude. Dennis is here. Dennis, how do you pronounce your last name? I don't want to butcher it on the internet for everybody
it's Salvadier.
Salvadier. Awesome. Yeah. Dennis Salvadier. And Dennis is here, and he's going to break down just his overall awesomeness with us. And we're just going to talk about some nerdy stuff because that's what we do. But we're super stoked. So, Dennis, how are you?
Good, fellas. I'm good. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for that lovely intro. I hope I do not disappoint you guys.
Well, I mean, I say this about really high.
I say this about what Mitch says about me every week. Mitch is so good. Like, and you've got actual talent, you know, and like Mitch polishes the turd that is his co-star all the time. So
what can I say? I'm in the turd polishing business. I like what I do. It's a good thing. We all need a hobby.
We all need a hobby, man. I polish a personal turd of mine here and there every once in a while, man.
It makes you a better person.
Not everything is gold, man. So, you know, sometimes you just gotta do the best you can with what you got.
I say to my wife an awful lot of the time when she'll just when something random will happen, or I'll say something really stupid, or just, you know, life goes down, and she'll just kind of give me that look that just says, "What were you thinking?" And she doesn't even have to say the words. And then my response is always, "Hey, they're not all first round draft picks. It's just deal with it, all right?"
Yeah, man. Yeah.
All right. So, Dennis, why don't you go ahead and give us a shout out quick on your website and your Instagram and stuff like that so people know how to find you. And then we'll kind of dive into some dirty topics here.
Sure. Well, like you guys mentioned, my name is Dennis Salvadier. Online, I'm known as Tanoshiboy. And that name basically means, the Tanoshi part of it anyway, means fun in Japanese. So when I was looking for a cool, fun kind of designer name, when my wife being half Japanese, I just started to look at, you know, the language and if I could find something in there that kind of encapsulated what I wanted to, you know, how I wanted to be perceived. So most people don't know what Tanoshi means anyway, but I think the word sounds fun. So
it rolls off the tongue. It's got that cool little thing.
It does. I think it does. And since I think about 2012, I've been working under that moniker, at least online. You know, I'm a designer and illustrator, but it's been fun making that transition from being just a guy that does, you know, work for hire and operating as a business into being just an artist, who's part of this large online artist community. And it's been fun, you know, especially with platforms like Instagram. You get to connect with other designers and illustrators and people who become fans of your work, which is the weirdest thing. I mean, to know that there are people who follow my work and enjoy it and comment and send me direct messages asking me for advice on what to do with their lives. I'm like, dude, I'm trying to figure it out myself. Like, are you sure you really want me to give you advice?
It's like, dude, there's no answer. Just suck less than you did yesterday. Just all
dude,
right.
That's it. That is exactly it. I mean, one great piece of advice was something I got from a cartoon from Adventure Time, which is I think Jake says something like, you know, the first step God, I forget the way it goes.
I actually remember the quote because I say it to my 3-year-old sometimes.
Yeah, how does it go?
It's sucking at something is the first step to being kind of good at something. I saw you did an illustration with that. And I did,
and that's what's so funny that I don't remember it right now. That's how good I am at advice, guys. But yeah,
hashtag nailed it.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. You know, I mean, that there's you can go to school and you can learn all kinds of things, but when you really get down to it, I mean, nothing is going to be perfect right off the bat. And I think you have to just accept that and roll with it and just be better the next time, you know. And sometimes you need a break, and when you get back to work, you know, you're a little rusty and you suck a little bit, but as long as you know that, you know, once you get a few drawings out of your system, you know, they'll look better. And as long as the client is happy, then you should be fine. So, you can find my stuff at salvatierstudios.com. There you can find all sorts of links to where you can find me. So like Facebook, and I don't think I have an Instagram link up there, but you can find me on Instagram as Tanoshiboy, or just look up my name, Dennis Salvadier. But yeah, I'm always down to talk about anything. I one of the things about the online world that I really love is just connecting with people that I would normally never meet, you know? So I'm flattered when I get a message from someone from Australia who said that they received my print and they have it up on their wall, or someone in Argentina.
That's legit.
Yeah, man, it's so cool. And I don't think I'll ever get used to that. You know, I also do one show a year, one convention a year that is out here in Southern California. And this year it's going to be in Anaheim, which is right by Disneyland. And it's called a Designer Con. And to see people come to visit me year after year to come buy my work so that they can put up, so they can frame and put up on their wall in their home. I'm never going to get used to that. That's still super cool. And I'm so appreciative that people come and see me in the first place, you know? So, I feel blessed, man. I feel super lucky that I'm able to do this as a career because, just from hearing from some of the younger kids, who DM me, you know, on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, a lot of these kids, they perceive that your career is this amazing thing and they want to achieve that same level, but they don't realize it's a job like anything else, you know. It's a job.
For sure.
And it requires work and, it requires a lot of passion and patience. So, I mean, hopefully, if I can help anybody, I'm happy to do it, but just know, man, I'm a work in progress, and I think I will be. And I think anybody who's creative will be till the day they leave this planet, you know? So,
you're not wrong. I think that's about as legit as it gets. Couple of things. The Instagram thing is just really cool. I mean, it's such a cliche to say, but at the same time, like, it's a cliche for a reason. Like, Instagram is just such a wonderful tool to connect with people. And also just, I appreciate Instagram because it's a good vehicle for art. Like, that seems to be the one out of the popular mainstream social media platforms where that one just still comes back to the concept of take a moment and appreciate a photograph, whether it's something that you created or it's something that you captured that was already there. But Instagram is obviously where I found you, I think about 3 years ago, started following your work. So I've been stalking you for 3 years, Dennis. Congratulations. We've made it this far.
You've been really great at it because I had no idea you're around, man.
I'm stealthy, you know. I wait for my moments and then I pounce. It's what a good stalker does.
Right on, man.
But I would say that I just obviously Jake and I are both huge comic book fans and watch all of the different movies and television shows, of course. And so Jake, I'm sure he has seen. Jake is the biggest Spider-Man nut I know. Okay, and I'm about as big of a Superman fan as I know, and so I'm partial to. Your piece of "You're Here for a Reason" is my personal favorite of yours.
Oh, that's awesome, man!
And
yeah,
it's one I find myself revisiting an awful lot when I scroll through stuff, and I'm like, that's damn good. This is a damn good piece.
Thanks,
put together.
Man. Thanks. Yeah, Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and then obviously, like, you've got some different amazing Spider-Man and Sinister Six and stuff like that you've got featured on your sites as well. So you clearly know how to scratch those comic book itches.
Oh yeah, man. I've loved, I mean, before I even started reading comics, I loved these characters. I remember watching Super Friends when I was a kid, and
yes, you do. Oh my gosh, yes, you do.
Yeah, it was. It's hard to watch now, but but back then, it was mind blowing, And I remember being 4 or 5 and seeing. I didn't see Superman the movie from the beginning, but I remember. I think my dad or my mom was flipping through the channels, and I remember it distinctly being ABC. And I remember seeing the scene where Superman, Christopher Reeve, opens his shirt, reveals the S, and then runs into the revolving door and comes out dressed as Superman, and then catches Lois Lane in midair and catches the helicopter right after. That was the moment, and I distinctly remember that was a moment that just captured my imagination in the way that nothing had up until that moment. And I've been following those characters since then. I'm a huge Superman fan as well, and I'm also a huge Spider-Man fan. So I think we're gonna get along really well.
Basically, we're best friends now, is what that means. And,
I think so, man.
It's like, gosh, it's so corny, but like in so many ways. I could go off on a huge tangent, but in so many ways, it feels like Richard Donner's first Superman installment is still the standard by so many different degrees, and those iconic moments still resonate. And man, I just think of how many childhoods were changed because they saw Christopher Reeve busting out the S and saving the day. That's my story, but that's the story for so many other folks, because that's just such a good piece of comic book cinema, and it still holds up.
I wasn't old enough to have gone to the. I don't think I was. I was just a few months old when the movie hit theaters, so I wasn't going to be able to enjoy it in a theater. But once it was in, premiering on television, and eventually I saw it. I saw the entire movie through cable somehow. It just blew me away. That something like that can exist, but that it has like 3 distinct acts. When you think about the 3-act structure, the first part of the movie is very it's almost Shakespearean, and then as soon as and then you get to Smallville, and then it becomes very, I don't know what the right description is, but I feel like
Smallville is like the show Smallville is almost like, it's not quite melodramatic, but it's very meta, and it's kind of got that feel of like One Tree Hill, but also at the same time it's still very rooted in the richness of the original characters that inspired the show too. So and it's kind of like, as corny as some of those WB moments can be for a show like that, I feel like Smallville still blazed quite a trail, because that was definitely ahead of the curve as far as like comic book stuff wasn't really in the forefront of our psyches yet. Like Iron Man hadn't been dropped. The Dark Knight trilogy with Christopher Nolan hadn't really been a thing yet, and Smallville had a nice run. I think it was on for like 9 or 10 years.
Yeah, if I remember,
really enjoying this momentum. Kind of speaks to the timelessness of just the Superman character in general.
Yeah, I think that what the Superman movie did for movies obviously is huge, but then especially for all the comic book movies that came after it, even though there were a few lulls. Between like even after the disappointment like Batman and Robin, right? There was a big lull in comic book movies, but
bat nipples.
Man. Oh man, the bat nipples. But I think the Smallville show did for the TV that we're enjoying now what the Superman movie did for movies, if that makes sense. I think it made things it made people feel like these characters are accessible and they can be shared with a wider audience. And, movies are one thing, man, but TV is in your home. And when TV's in your home, I mean, the characters become almost like family members, and, you come and see them every week, so movies are great, but movies don't have that what do you call it? That closeness that TV has, I think, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're not just welcoming them into your home, you're living with them and investing in them emotionally for years. So if you get hooked into a show, you're signing on and saying, okay, I am going to follow these main characters. I'm going to allow myself to be emotionally tied to them on one level or another. And like, not to make it sound overly serious, but that's essentially what you're doing, because you're not going to follow – if Smallville's on for 9 seasons and you're going to watch all those episodes, you're not going to follow it along unless you're enjoying the emotional connection on some level or another. That's just how it works. And what's interesting about that is I feel like, because sometimes Superman on a bad rap and gets overly stereotyped, and people say like, oh, he's too powerful. Oh, we're too familiar with his story so much that there isn't much room for nuance. And I feel like even with the WB factor hanging over the Smallville show, it at least opened up an avenue for us to explore, crannies of the Clark Kent Superman psyche that we hadn't entered in before. It's like, yeah, we know he becomes Superman at the end of the day, and we know that he ends up with Lois Lane and works at the Daily Planet at the very end. But traveling through that journey beforehand and actually like seeing him fall in love as a teenager and figuring out what this dating life is like and learning what it's like to have friends and enemies at the same time before he really has this moniker of superhero. All of that, I think, humanizes it in a way and allows this different layers of emotion to enter into a point that we didn't necessarily have beforehand. And that may be an overly deep take for a show that the WB produced, but at the same time, there's got to be a reason why it was on for as long as it was and why people were saying this is an emotional experience I'm enjoying.
Yeah, I think it's because of the fact that people early on really connected with the characters, and even though there were some really just kind of crappy seasons. I don't remember which ones distinctly, but there were a few that were like, what are we doing right now? But
it was just a little off the beaten path.
Yeah, man, it was a little rough, but you love these characters so much that you're willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and write it out, and there was that one season where they introduced Doomsday, and he's this guy, he's some God, I don't remember exactly what his origin was, but I just remember him being
a dude.
Yeah, he was dating Chloe, and he was like an EMT guy, and he had like he was destined to become Doomsday. And I'll give him credit. They went with a practical suit, and they made Doomsday look kind of cool. He was half the size, if not a third of the size of what he actually is in the comic book. So he wasn't as scary, but. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, man. As soon as I heard that they were going to introduce Doomsday, I went for it. I got caught up in it, and I mean, it's funny to know now that the girl that was dating Doomsday on Smallville is now implicated in some crazy sex cult shenanigans, But
I mean, one thing leads to another, doesn't it? I mean, it's just kind of how it goes.
The breadcrumbs on that one are insane.
It's just it's unreal where it ended up. It really is.
Yeah. I feel like someday there's going to be a documentary about her life on Smallville and where it led to currently.
It's a docuseries in the making. Netflix is working on a contract for it, I'm sure. Yeah. But what's interesting too is just like looking. I feel like we're far enough removed from Smallville and enough deeply invested in some newer installments too, like the Daredevil, Jessica Jones on Netflix, and then like Arrow and Flash and Supergirl on WB. That we're far enough removed from Smallville that I can see where I feel like it's safe to compare, and I think Smallville is still better than Arrow and maybe even Supergirl, not necessarily better than Flash, maybe on the same level. You know what I mean? It's just really interesting to think that I think Smallville can still have a little bit of a lasting power, even though it's not really competing against the heyday that we're in right now.
Sure. Yeah. I do enjoy some of those shows, even with the melodrama that comes with it. You know, I
They
don't
are
know.
what they are. I think you know what
They
you're
are.
getting with them.
Yeah, I think you need to. I think some of the stuff that I see online in comment sections complaining about something like Supergirl, right? I mean, you gotta. It has a certain audience, and the reason I'm watching it is because I just like comic book stuff. You know, I mean, I don't know what it's like to be a 20-something girl in a big city. Wanting to date, you know, Jimmy Olsen and whoever the hot guy is at the moment. I think it's Monel still. I'm a little behind, but I just like all the comic book stuff. That's why I'm in, you know, and I like the characters enough that I'll go along with their silly relationship stuff. But people get so upset about, you know, all the drama stuff. It's like, you know, maybe the show isn't for you, but it's not. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad show. It's just,
and also like look at the network. I mean, like
yes.
I don't want to give WB a bad rap, but like, come on, WB has a very specific brand, and they have a very specific feel for the types of shows that they run. And it's like, okay, if you're gonna watch a couple of episodes of Supergirl, knowing full well that it's on the CW, the WB teenager station, then it's like, okay, you know exactly what you're getting. Like, come on.
Yeah,
like, I don't think anybody's surprised by that.
I think you guys are hitting on like something that is both like the good and the bad of this culture that we love and live in. That like there's a dark side to it where if we don't monitor ourselves, it's easy for like that ownership that we all feel on these characters to slide over into a negative thing and become this weird possessive, like almost like abusive spouse thing where you're like, no one understands you like I do. And we get so hung up on our interpretation that we forget, you know, everyone having their interpretation is what made these characters so ubiquitous and such a big deal in culture in general. Yeah,
you are absolutely right, man. I mean, you're preaching to the choir. I feel like these characters, exactly what you said, that they've been around for almost 80 years, if not more, because of the fact that they've been able to be interpreted over and over again for different audiences. I mean, you know, there was, I'm sure there was a fan base for Lois and Clark: The Adventures of Superman. I mean, that was someone's Superman, right? Now, you know, before that, there was Christopher Reeve, and that's, you know, to a certain extent, there was also that syndicated Superboy show, right?
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, with the bad Jerry curl.
Yes. Was there a good Jerry curl?
Well, there's the deep philosophical question of the
day. Yeah, but you know, you have to understand that not everything is going to be tailor made for you. And I'm old enough. I'm going to be 40 in August. I'm old enough to have lived through a time where we didn't get a lot of comic book stuff. So when there was a Steel movie starring Shaquille O'Neal, sometimes we were excited to see it because we didn't have all the content, all the superhero content that we have now. So today's audiences they're absolutely spoiled and they're very entitled, and they get so pissed off because something isn't like the comic books, or something isn't like, you know, some people really gravitate towards, like, say, Justice League Unlimited, and that's their canon. And when something doesn't live up to that particular tone, then it's bad, and it should be.
The hot take culture is just a little too extreme, because it's like on Twitter especially, it's this comic book Twitter and comic book movie Twitter is this concept of like it's like you either draw the line in the sand, no matter how absurd it may be, or you're not going to be welcome into the conversation. That just seems to be a little ridiculous, because I feel like it's like, okay, I'm a DC fanboy first and foremost, and I really appreciate what Zack Snyder did in the DCEU, but I'm also really looking forward to Shazam and Aquaman, and I feel like the DCEU Twitterverse right now is divided between the people that the only thing they can talk about is give me the Snyder cut version of Justice League, and then the other people are like, yeah, but aren't you excited to see Aquaman? And then the other side's like, no, Zack Snyder. It's a little out of control. But if you want to talk about, like, I feel like there's room for both, because like you said, the Steel movie with Shaquille O'Neal is about as a low point as it gets production wise, but at the same time, like you said, coming at a time period when we have such a little amount to choose from. Like I identify so much with the 90s John Wesley Shipp The Flash show.
Oh God,
dude.
Oh my God.
It's so bad, but I grew up on that. My grandpa taped every single one of those episodes on TV and gave them to me on taped VHS. And now I have them on DVD and they sit on my shelf. And you know what? I watch that show annually and it's awesomely bad, but man, it's just like I pop that in and I relive my childhood at a time when it was like I didn't have much for watching comic books, especially if you weren't watching cartoons. It was like you had Batman the animated series, Superman the animated series, you had X-Men, and if you're an 80s kid, you had a little bit of Thundercats, and that's about it. And then it's like you got the old school Flash, and that's about all we had for small screen entertainment there.
Yeah, and the Flash. Fun fact: that was the show that really pushed me into comic books. Like I read comics here and there, but the show really captured, I don't know, a part of my imagination, and I was like, who is this guy? You know, who's Barry Allen? This is awesome. Like,
Jake, where do you stand on the John Wesley Shipp Flash crew?
I'm so glad you asked because I didn't want to run over anybody there. I have this very clear memory in my head that I am not certain my mom would remember. I don't know how old I was, but I had to be small because my brother wasn't born yet, of being in my Flash pajamas, running around the couch in circles, like sprinting as fast as I could, which in hindsight was probably not fast at all. And while the Flash was on TV and my mom being like, don't you want to actually watch it? And I was like, I'm the Flash, I'm running. And like, I adore that show. And that John Wesley Shipp got a role in the CW Flash series was like, meant the world to me on the weirdest level ever.
Same here.
Man.
It's like the full circle connection. It just felt right, and it twinged parts of your heart that you didn't know still existed.
Yeah. Oh, dude. And when he became like the Jay Garrick Flash,
yes,
I was like, this is everything I didn't know I wanted. Like I just that show. I mean, I'm behind a season, so I don't really know exactly what's been going on. I have a little idea of what's been going on in the current season, but I love that they brought John Wesley Shipp onto the show because I had such an affection, like you guys have, for that original Flash show. I mean, from the theme song that was, if I'm correct, I believe it was created by the composer of the Batman animated series, Shirley.
Gosh, now I'm going to be doing it too.
I'm looking it up.
Good, thank you. We good. This is the good host.
I want to say she's Shirley Walker. Shirley Walker. I want to say Shirley Walker. That's the name that I have in my head. I think it's Shirley Walker.
I'm going to trust you on that because I am drawing a total blank.
I mean, you can go on Spotify or any other source of music and find her stuff, and you will fall in love with just how incredibly talented she is. And if I'm correct, I think she also did the theme song for The Flash, because there were so many things that when I remember watching the Batman animated series, especially listening to the music, because I was a band kid for a while, so music I could really call it out and hear the different instruments and a certain style of music. Like for example, if you were to hear John Williams stuff, you know automatically it's his. It's like a fingerprint, you know. And with Shirley Walker, she had a certain sound to her music. And when I heard The Flash, I was like, that sounds like Batman the animated series and vice versa. But all this to say, man, that show is such a gem. And I'm sorry it only lasted a season, but for me, it did what it was meant to do, which is it totally propelled me right into comics. Because even though I read Archie comics and stuff like that, and some like the Gladstone, like Disney comics, like Uncle Scrooge and all that stuff, it was that show that jumped me right into super duper hero comics, man. That was it. I was, and the thing at the time was that the Flash that was running around in the comics wasn't Barry Allen. It was
Wally at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, who's this guy? Right? and then when I found out, when I went to the comic book shop and I asked, okay, so this is Wally West, but where's Barry Allen? And that's when I remember looking at the comic book, the clerk behind the desk, and he looks at the other guy in the store, and then they just kind of smile at each other. And that's when he tells me, he goes, he's dead. And I go, what? What do you mean he's dead?
There is no God. Your heroes are dead.
I was like, what are you talking about? He can't be dead. He goes, he died. And I go, when? And he goes, oh, back in the 80s during the crisis. And I go, what the hell is the crisis? You know? And it just, I mean, that opened up my imagination, man. That was it. I was hooked on continuity, and I wanted to know what happened and why. And then reading that, reading Crisis on Infinite Earths for the first time was overwhelming, but it was awesome. And then to see the fall of Barry Allen, the Flash, the original Flash. Well, as far as the guys running around in red tights and not the Jake Eric one, I mean, that was crazy. And then seeing Supergirl die. I mean, I'm going to go off on tangents here, man, because I mean, it's just one thing leads to another.
Tangents are our bread and butter. Don't even worry about it.
Yeah, dude.
Let's take a quick moment to appreciate the brilliance that is Shirley Walker. So I've got her IMDb page up here. So she either was the sole composer or worked on the music department of the following titles: Batman the Animated Series, The Flash, Superman the Animated Series, Batman Mask of the Phantasm, the first Dark Knight movie, Escape from LA, the Spawn TV show, Final Destination movies, and Batman Beyond. Like, she's just basically was like the greatest. Oh, and Dick Tracy. She was on the music department for Dick Tracy too.
Wow.
So she did like all the nerd-tastic stuff from the 90s and early aughts.
And in regards to her career, can I say that, like, to this day, if I do a good deed, and I don't mean like if I save a boy from a speeding bus, like if I pick up, if I take my neighbor's trash can back for them on trash day, I hear the theme to Batman the Animated Series in my head. That like da 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 da. That's like my good guy music in my head forever.
I think that's totally normal behavior.
Yeah, I've done that. Something very similar to that. And if I was wearing a long sleeve shirt, sometimes if I hadn't buttoned it up yet, I would kind of pretend that it was a cape and swirl it around a little bit. Yes. Yeah, I'm sorry.
As one does, I think that's totally fine. Yeah.
Who among us has not taken some long sleeve shirt and pretended it was a cape? I mean, if you're out there, you don't have a soul, whoever they are.
Yeah,
absolutely. You're clearly not the demographic for this podcast, so get off.
What are you doing here?
Rock on. Well, Dennis, you're cut of the same cloth. I'm super excited to find another kindred spirit. I want to hear a little bit more about, you've had part of what's really cool about following your art online is that you're obviously building up a nice fan base and you seem to have a good attitude about it, which is good. You're not one of those jerk offs that's like, give me all the attention. So mad props, as they like to say. But, I do know because, like I said, I've been stalking you for about 3 years now. Mm-hmm. You've had some also really cool features and partnerships with things like Fandango and everything like that. So Fandango is kind of a big deal for those of you movie heads out there. So unpack for us kind of like how does that happen? Like how do you become this like really cool guy that's got these really cool art pieces online to all of a sudden you're creating original stuff for promotional materials for a Fandango ad campaign?
Yeah, man. I think it all starts with just putting yourself out there, which for creative people, sometimes it's everything you want and nothing of what you want. You want people to see your work, but then you're deathly afraid to put it out there and you have the fear that they're not going to connect to it or not want to have anything to do with it. So the first thing that I did was I made a conscious decision that I needed to put my work out there. I needed to put myself out there. I needed to get from behind my sketch pad, my drafting table, and my monitor, and put myself out in front of people. And once I got the opportunity to do so, that's what opened up the doors. That's the one thing that really helped to to create a fan base, which wasn't initially what I was looking to do, but it came along with deciding that, and even if I didn't have work, paid work at the time, I gave myself projects. So I would say, you know what, today I'm going to do, a sketch of this, a sketch of that. And I'm not getting paid for any of this stuff, but I'm doing it because I enjoy it and because I just wanted to share it. So while I was putting myself out there and doing like small shows, and I was also doing, using Instagram and online platforms to share the work. And little by little, it took a few years. I think it was around 2012 that was really when I started to do it. And that got on the radar of a curator. And next thing you know, he's invited me to do a gallery 1988 show, which for designers and illustrators, that is a pretty big deal, because it's if it's not the biggest pop culture gallery in the world, I mean, it's definitely one of them. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah, to be included in a show is a big deal. And so that kind of got the snowball going. And next thing you know, as the more and more that I share work online, I start to get paid work, and I start to get the attention of someone like Fandango. And when they saw the work, they said, I think we can tell that you love movies. So, would you be interested in doing something that's movie based? I'm like, yeah, man, that sounds awesome. So, one of the first projects I did for them was a John Hughes tribute. So
yes. It's God bless really, John Hughes.
Yeah, man. So, I mean, when they said John Hughes, I was like, what do you need? I'll do it. I mean, whatever you want. And so they said, oh, we saw some of your little BFF illustrations, your series, and we thought maybe you could do something like that. But in regards to John Hughes movies, it doesn't necessarily mean he had to have directed it. But if he was the writer or a producer or whatever, it's all in the John Hughes universe. So boom, just go for it. And so I put together a piece that led to getting more attention. And that's kind of how it goes, man. So I started a nice little relationship with Fandango. Some things changed within the recent years, the change in the guard. They kind of stopped doing fan art features and stuff like that. But I got to do a Superman piece right before Batman v Superman came out, and that was really fun too, because I love Superman, and I do love the Man of Steel Superman. I really enjoy. I think
you should, because you are a good person.
And I know he gets a lot of crap, because he's not like the comic book Superman, and he's not like this Superman, but there is something really cool about him and very humanized that I really enjoy. And so to be able to do a tribute piece, I was honored to do it. And so that led to something else, that like I mentioned, the Designer Con, I started to do that show around 2012, and every year that I did it, the crowds started getting bigger, and I would get the attention of certain art directors. And on one occasion, I sold a print to somebody not knowing who he was. And then the following year, I get an email that says at Disney, and I'm like, wow, that's weird. This must be spam, right? And I click on it, I open it. I open it, and sure enough, I get an email from Dustin at Disney, and he says, we really love your work, and we wanted to know if you wanted to work on some digital stickers for Rogue One. And I'm like, dude, yes, I will absolutely do that. How many do you need? And then, once we get through the art direction and we jump on the phone and talk to Facebook and Disney and whoever else is involved on the conference call, everybody's on the same page. And then you start illustrating, start getting to it. And once that was done, it led to, some other digital stickers, Guardians of the Galaxy. And I did Thor Ragnarok and The Last Jedi. So there's been a number of projects that I've been very fortunate and lucky to have worked on with Disney. But it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for me putting myself out there, and that anyone can do that. I'm no one special in that regard. The only thing that I did was just make the choice, and anyone can do that. So it's scary.
Just park it on there. Just put the internet's out there. Just park it on there and help navigate people to go see it. And then, more people will see it. It's there's really not a magical formula because the formula is just like put it out there.
Yeah, I mean that's it. But I will absolutely stress, you have to be in front of people as well as you're doing the digital showcase of your work and stuff like that. That's great, but being in front of people and putting your neck out there and talking to people, that will do wonders. And as long as you're nice and you're not a dick about it, because I've met many a designer and illustrator at certain shows that just they don't know how good they have it. And if they were just a little more humble, I think, things would be probably a lot better for them. But that's beside the point. It's just be nice, be nice. I would see some of these designers and illustrators at these shows, and sometimes they would just sit there and draw, or they would just sit there and you would pass by. They wouldn't say hello to you. They wouldn't acknowledge you, but they're there because they want you to look at their work. But that something was not very inviting about their energy. So I knew right off the bat, it's like, if I'm going to do this, I got to be nice. I got to be engaging. I got to ask. I got to say good morning. I mean, that's first and foremost. Just say good morning. Hey, man, how you doing? Like, if that can do wonders for you like no other. And that's really what it comes down to this business, or starting any kind of business. But in the creative businesses, you got to be approachable. You got to be a nice guy. And at the end of the day, you got to be good at what you're doing. If you can be nice and all that stuff, but you really got to keep, working at your craft, and it gets hard sometimes, and you get a little burned out, but that's when you take a month off and rest and then get back to it, So it really starts with putting yourself out there, coming through, sticking to deadlines, being dependable. And if you got a tight deadline, you got to be able to know whether you can do it or not and be honest about it, because sometimes you want to take something on and in your head you probably shouldn't do it. And I'm definitely guilty of that. And that can lead to some burnout. But in the end, man, I mean, I'm so lucky to get to do this as my job. I mean, I get to do the thing that I said I would do when I was a kid. Like I told myself, no matter what happens, I want to be paid to be creative, whatever that is,
That's awesome.
And I'm actually doing it, and it has its ups and downs, but dude, I mean, at the end of the day, I get paid to draw. And sometimes I have to remind myself of that.
Yeah. It's not a small thing, but I think the biggest nuggets that we have unearthed throughout this wonderful conversation is suck less tomorrow and don't be a jerk.
Exactly. Yes.
At the end of the day, humans, this is what we can learn.
Yes, absolutely, man.
I was just about to say, like, what I'm hearing here is the secret to success is put yourself out there and don't be a dick about it. And
that's it, man.
It's amazing how many people fail at that, though. So
right. Yeah. I mean, is it too soon to say it didn't work out for Roseanne?
Ooh, yeah.
That's the kind of topical comedy you get on this show.
But
ripped from today's headlines.
Yeah, that's right. Low hanging fruit, man. I'm all about that. So, Dennis, we would be remiss if we didn't ask the ultimate question that is going to fuel the hot take culture that we've just loved so much. Okay. And the ultimate question that is really why Jake and I have set out on this quest to fix everyone else's opinions about the Hollywood treatment of our beloved comic books, which is give us your top 5 like desert island short list of favorite comic book movies and or TV shows. Let's riff through this and see if you can make any enemies.
All right. Oh, I'm going to make plenty, man. I am going to make plenty. But let's throw a softball out there, right? Because I want to get some people to like me, right? Because I know that some of these are going to be controversial picks, but I'll throw a softball.
But you can't be a jerk. We talked about that. You can't be a jerk. So you got to win some people over.
Okay, so let me start with, and these are in no particular order, but I am a fan of Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
Okay, see, that's a safe pick, but it's a safe pick because it's right.
It's a good movie, period. And it just so happens that there are guys wearing superhero outfits and sporting a metal arm. I mean, it from beginning to end, that movie is such a giant leap from what the first Captain America was.
Yeah.
And it's great. It's just amazing. Like from beginning to end, when you first see Cap jump out of that plane without a parachute and jumps onto that ship and beats the hell out of everybody, that's when I realized it's like this is Captain America. Like he really embodied the essence of that character so well, especially in scenes like, for example, most people won't think about certain scenes like the one I'm about to pick, but I think these are the kind of moments that really tell you what the rest of the movie is going to be like, and that this character has not just morals, but that he has not just a moral compass, but he has ideals, right? Captain America is a character who has an ideal of what America is. And he is America, or what the best of America can be. So when he has that conversation with Nick Fury about all these souped up helicarriers that I think he got from Tony Stark, or that Tony Stark had something to do with. There's that back and forth about preparing for what could happen, and Captain America saying, "This isn't freedom. This is fear." And that, more than anything else in that movie, just has stayed with me. And there's no action, there's no fighting, there's nothing super heroic about that scene between Nick Fury and Captain America. But I love that scene so much, because at that moment I know that they're going to do right by that character. So everything else is
it's an appropriate mic drop moment.
It's such a good mission statement for the rest of the film.
Yes, absolutely. So, obviously, the revelation of Bucky being the Winter Soldier, and him not wanting to fight, who is essentially like a brother to him. I mean, that stuff's great, and it had everything that a movie should have. It had some lighter moments, but it also had some really dramatic moments. It had that big revelation of MODOK. I mean, no, not MODOK. What's the name of that dude?
The
Arnim Zola.
Computer.
Yes.
Zola. Yep.
I did not see that coming, but that was awesome. That was so.
It was
awesome.
such good fan service while still being within the rules they'd written for themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like Winter Soldier marks the first time in the MCU where they figured out exactly how to hit a home run with both doing spectacle but also making a good cinematic experience. Like it was equal parts popcorn movie and equal parts high quality cinema for what it was at the same time. And it wasn't more one than the other, and it didn't feel like they had bitten off more than they could chew. Just they really found that sweet spot, and it kind of set the precedent there. So I think it's a totally welcome pick.
Yeah. I love that movie. I can watch it anytime, whether I pop it on or it just happens to be on cable. I'll watch it to the very end. I'm in, man. I love that movie so much. So the next one, I'm gonna go for it, guys. I'm gonna say Batman v Superman Ultimate Edition.
Oh my gosh, Dennis. Okay,
Jake. This is why you wanted to set this interview up. I see.
Yeah, pretty much. Jake, you are outnumbered.
No, it's okay.
How do you like it?
I'm so glad people appreciate that movie. I think I have a lot of issues with that movie as far as my own enjoyment of it. But like, again, back to that whole thing about not being a dick about it. I do feel people are way too hard on it.
Well, the thing is that Marvel, Marvel wasn't the first studio to create comic book movies, right? I mean, Warner Brothers was doing that way before them. But what Marvel did right was they created the cinematic universe, right? So they set a tone. They set a tone at just the right time they set a zeitgeist, is what I'm trying to say. And when DC decided that they were going to create their own cinematic universe, they went a different way, obviously. But the thing that really kind of irked fans was simply that it wasn't like Marvel, and that is distinctly why I loved it, because even though, and I agree with you, I had some problems with it myself. It's not a perfect movie by any means. There is so much good. There's more good in that movie than there is bad. And
I couldn't agree more with you. And the Ultimate Edition gives us the Jenna Malone scenes and gives us a little bit more context and allows us to pace ourselves a little bit more, which I think is key. I mean, I've said this before on the podcast, but like, Man of Steel was a pinnacle moment for me because I'm youngish. I'm 30 years old. I hadn't been able to see a real Superman movie on the big screen in my lifetime because Superman Returns doesn't count. That's just a giant pile of poo. So when Man of Steel came out, I cried at multiple points in that movie because it's like I'm seeing this character that I have been tied to on a deep emotional level on the big screen for the first time. And it was just a really big moment. And then I had been saying for so much of my life that I wanted to see Death of Superman on the big screen. I just was like, I couldn't understand with all the superhero treatment that we had been ramping up to. I was like, why have we not done something like this yet? Because it was like, it's the best selling graphic novel for a reason. And so I'm like, this is like, why do we always have to watch Lex Luthor do real estate deals when we've got this amazing storyline right here? And so when Batman versus Superman came and I knew exactly what we were going to get, and it was, again, a flawed movie, but man, it was spectacle, and it was well performed, and it was well executed, and it touched on so many wonderful things. And I went and saw that movie more than once in theaters. And that's one of the few times I've ever done that. And so it's just like that movie means something even among all of its flaws. And so I think it deserves a place at the table. So God bless you, Dennis. You're one of the good ones.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah. I before I move on to the next one, I wanted to point out one of my favorite scenes, if not my favorite scene, which is it's actually a montage, but it's the montage I think within the first act of the movie where people are discussing on the news and shows and things like that, does the world need a Superman? And to see Superman, doing things around the world, and people reacting to a Superman existing. The fact that people are looking up in the sky and wondering, having doubts, right? Because this isn't the 1970s. You're not going to have Christopher Reeve Superman and everyone's going to be like, he saved her. Oh my gosh. And then everybody's in love with this guy, right? We live in a very distrusting time, right? There's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of division, right? And even more so now. And when you introduce a super being into the world and that this person exists, you're going to have doubts. There's going to be moments where you don't know if this guy is here to actually do good, or he's just pretending to do it. And wondering if he has actual ulterior motives. So that scene where everybody's reacting to him and wondering, do we need a Superman? That I absolutely love, because on the other hand, when you think about, and I hate to compare things most times, but when you think about Thor, for example, the only people that reacted to him were really the core of characters in the first Thor movie, Natalie Portman and the other two. But the world never reacted to the Thor existing in the world. No one ever made a comment, except for Nick Fury at some point saying, and I think it was Avengers, as soon as Thor showed up, like, we had to start thinking about how we're going to protect ourselves from alien threats, So I really love the fact that the world was reacting, that you were able to see from the ground what it was like to experience the coming of a Superman, right? Like that first scene in Batman v Superman where Bruce Wayne is running through Metropolis and it's being destroyed. I absolutely enjoyed that scene, and yes, again, flawed movie. Lex Luthor is not great, but still great. I will watch that movie over and over again, and I think hopefully,
and I think I was just going to say, I think that's why I appreciate David S. Goyer and Christopher Nolan's approach to just the whole concept is what you nailed right there. Because I remember when Man of Steel was getting ready to be released, and they're doing the press release tour and everything like that, and I'm watching interviews and just ingesting all of the multimedia about this movie as much as I can before the movie comes out, because it's like my little drug fix before I can actually watch it. Mm-hmm. I remember watching an interview with Goyer where he was like, I've never understood why no one had really approached the Superman narrative from the concept of like, this would literally freak people out and change everything if an alien showed up.
Yes.
And so I was like, and that was the perfect way to bring just a twinge of humanism to a character that people consistently complain about being too powerful. It's like, yeah, you know what? Especially in the United States, everyone would flip shit.
Oh yeah, dude.
If this guy just showed up and that was their starting point. And so I think they handled it as beautifully as they possibly could and made it, like, ironically as it may sound, they made it conceivable. And I think that's good foundation for that narrative to stand on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that a lot of people love Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man, and he's Marvel's flagship character. But I have to say, my favorite Spider-Man movie is Spider-Man 2. I really.
That's really good one.
I'm not a Homecoming guy. I'm sorry. I know everybody loves the new Peter Parker, but
Jake, the gloves are off. Go in there.
And look, dude, as a guy that loves Spider-Man, I love Spider-Man. Out of all my comics, my vast comic book collection, I must have like 25 to 30 long boxes. The biggest collection I have is of Amazing Spider-Man, because I started in the 90s and I didn't stop until 2014, like around, I think the springtime of 2014. I have every Amazing Spider-Man issue from when I started in the 90s to 2014.
That's amazing.
I love that character. I love him so much because, I mean, he's the ultimate everyman, right? He just happens to have superpowers. But I don't know, man. I really like Tobey Maguire, even with his flaws. And Spider-Man 3 wasn't great, but there was some stuff that was good here and there in that movie. But
Spider-Man 3 wasn't great. The understatement of the century.
But Spider-Man 2, man, really captured that struggle of wanting to be a good guy, right? Out of guilt of his greatest failure, of letting his Uncle Ben down, right? And wrestling with that. Anytime his Uncle Ben gets mentioned by his Aunt May, you see that guilt on his face, and you feel that he is absolutely conflicted between wanting to be a normal guy and doing the thing he promised he would do, right? And Homecoming, I got none of that, right? There was no mention of Uncle Ben, and it's fine. You don't have to. You don't want to do the origin. That's fine. But I got no idea that this version of Spider-Man was in it, out of guilt, like the character that I've known and loved for many years. Now, there's nothing wrong with that take on Spider-Man. That's fine. That's going to be someone's Spider-Man. Great. I'm totally cool with that. But Spider-Man 2, it's amazing. I mean, to hit it, right on the nose. The subway scene or the train scene. I mean, that it still holds up. It's still really great. And to see, that moment when he's going to stop the train and he's not as strong as Superman. He's not going to be able to stop it like he would. But the fact that he just, immediately right off the cuff starts throwing, his webs, and that's the only way that he knows he's going to be able to stop this thing. And he's still not sure if he's going to be able to do it, but he's going to try, man. He's always going to do the right thing, even if it kills him, and that's why I really enjoyed that sequel to Spider-Man. It holds up. It's great. Some of the banter isn't there. And I miss that, there's not a lot of jokes and him being more, more Spider-Man. But I think overall it really captures the essence of what the character should be, I think.
You make a really compelling argument there. So our very first episode, if you want to call it that, was actually me guest starring on an old podcast of Mitch's to discuss Spider-Man Homecoming last summer. And I'm a big Spider-Man guy myself. I don't have near the impressive collection you do, but Spidey has been my favorite for a long, long time. I remember being a kid and just being like, oh, this guy, he's kind of a smartass, and I'm kind of a smartass.
Right.
This is my guy. And then as I got older and I started like analyzing myself and thinking about why I am who I am, I was like, oh man, we're more alike than I like admitting. He's covering up his insecurities. Oh crap. And so for me, I actually did go so far as to say I am a homecoming guy, but where you've kind of made me repent a little bit, on that episode that we reused as a watching comics episode, when we were first getting started, I did rank them, and I flip-flopped. I said that I liked the original Spider-Man more than Spider-Man 2.
Okay.
But I actually recently rewatched those two, and I've since kind of changed my mind again, which is a thing I do every few years. So, I mean, drop in 2021 and we'll be talking about the... But
how much you love Spider-Man 3?
Yeah, man, it's I love Sam Raimi, and I liked Tobey Maguire, and I wanted so badly to be forgiving of Spider-Man 3. And we always talk about Mitch is the better person here, because Mitch can watch Batman versus Superman and say, yeah, it's not perfect, but I still liked it. And I watched Spider-Man 3 and I'm like, what have you done? What is going on? And no, it's just a really interesting perspective. The guilt angle, I'm really embarrassed to say, is not one that I've ever plugged into that film quite in that depth. And like, man, it's 11:07 here in Nebraska, and I have to work tomorrow, and there's a really good chance I'm going into work tired because I'm going to rewatch Spider-Man 2 to put the angle with it. Like, man,
priorities, man, priorities,
so man.
Good, because like I've gotten hints of that, but I've never viewed the whole film through that lens, and you've just. Man, that is happening. That's fantastic.
Dude, I'm telling you, that movie, that character is so driven by just guilt. And that's what makes him such a great character, is that he, regardless of the pain that he feels and the regret that he feels for failing, right?
Yeah.
For letting his Uncle Ben down. Like the one person who was there for him through thick and thin. A kid who didn't have any friends. I mean, all he had was his aunt and uncle, really. That guilt is what keeps him going out there shooting webs and beating up bad guys, right? And he masks it. He masks it with the humor, that with his wisecracking, and like you said, he's a smartass. But deep down, you know why he's doing it. You really know why he's mouthing off to these characters, because really it's gonna I mean, one of the best things that I would see in comics over the years, in Spidey comics, is that there would be times when the bad guys would just go, just shut up, will you shut up? Because he just keeps blabbering, and that I can totally relate to. God, ask any of my friends' wives how many times I've just run my mouth and offended them or made them walk away from me. Like, I know what that's like, man. I totally relate. But once you see that movie again, you'll realize that there's that scene with him and his aunt, when she gives him a $20 bill for his birthday. Like, you start to see the seeds of that guilt. And then later on, when he reveals to her that, that it was because of him that Uncle Ben died. And I was honestly concerned that when she got up and left, I was like, wow, what's going to happen there?
Yeah, for sure.
How does she feel about all this? And in the end, she doesn't straight out say it, but you realize that she knows that he's Spider-Man, like she realizes that he's Spider-Man, because then they have that conversation later on, in the backyard when they're cleaning out the garage and stuff. And you, maybe Peter didn't catch it, right? But as a viewer, you're starting to realize that Aunt May knows that he's Spider-Man, and she's just not going to say. She's going to let him get to that point, come to that realization at some point, and reveal himself. But it's not for her to bring up. So that movie is such a gem, because there's so many subtle things, and it's always the little dramatic moments. It's all the quiet moments that really make some of these movies great. And I don't know, man. I love movies. I love stories, but I love characters, and I love those those moments between characters. And yeah, man, and whether you watch it tonight, like you said you would, or maybe tomorrow, dude, you're really going to see it from a different point of view. And I think you'll see what I mean, you know?
Well, and I don't want to steal your time, but like, I love that you touched on my favorite thing about Spider-Man as I got older has always been that of all the superheroes, he fails. Mm-hmm. And he fails so spectacularly. I mean, you have the entire Bronze Age of comics is kicked off by the night Gwen Stacy died.
Absolutely.
And you have his whole life is defined by his failures. And he gets up the next morning, he goes out and does the right thing anyway, has always been to me this like such a poignant and timeless message. And the fact that, you know, my favorite hero can be the guy who fails most frequently has always been a big deal to me. So I just love where you're coming from with that.
Yeah, man. I go ahead, man. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think with Spider-Man 2, the summation of the whole allegory is with Dr. Octopus's death, which, spoiler alert for a 13-year-old movie. But like his last words are, "I'm not going to die a monster." Right. And I feel like that concept of guilt versus redemption and what are we going to feed the most is just kind of just a good way to sum up that entire film, because that's partially what made, at least in that particular narrative, what made those two such a good matchup for Spider-Man 2 as well, with Dr. Octopus combating against Spider-Man, with them both realizing that they've got this inner turmoil that is festering a whole lot more than they're willing to admit to themselves. And you've got to make that larger choice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the moral of that story was what Aunt May said, you know, that sometimes you got to put aside what you dream about in order to do the right thing. I know I'm paraphrasing, but that was the message. And he uses it to tell Doc Ock, you know, you were the person who said that, you know, intelligence is a gift and you should use it for the betterment of mankind. Like, I don't see those kinds of things in superhero movies nowadays, you know, as popular as the Marvel movies are. And how much, you know, people love Homecoming and stuff. I don't see that the essence of Spider-Man in this version of the character. He's fun and he's being funny and stuff like that, but he's not masking anything like the character that I know that he is. You know, he's not doing anything out of guilt. He wants to be famous. He wants to impress a billionaire. You know that. And that's fine. Again, that's this Spider-Man. And like I mentioned before, you know, these characters have been around for decades and they have to have a chance to evolve and to be different. So I enjoyed the movie for what it was, but man, nothing has captured Spider-Man the way that Spider-Man 2 has for me.
I will say the one moment that I felt in Homecoming really captured, not necessarily what you're talking about with the guilt angle, but the idea that, like, well, the moment when he's at the dance and he has his, you know, I need to go have this showdown and I need to go do the right thing here. And the girl that he's been trying to get to go to the dance with him through the whole movie is like standing there waiting on him.
Yeah. Yeah.
That to me was like the most Spider-Man moment of that film, because it was this moment where you had that dichotomy where what is good for Spider-Man is bad for Peter Parker usually.
Oh yeah. And that's the character, man.
Yeah. And that was, so I think that, you know, it's interesting because you talk about those character moments, and that's what for me really got me with that film, where up to that point I'd been enjoying it as just like a spectacle film. And, you know, I liked some of the themes running through it, the modern, you know, some very modern, very topical ideas of like the everyman versus the elite and all that. But it was that moment where I was really like, okay, someone in the writing staff gets this character. And that was for me really but I'm loving your perspective on number 2. I got to go back to that now.
Oh, I hope you enjoy it, man, in a different way.
Oh, I absolutely will. There's no question about that.
Yeah. I mean, Homecoming was great in the sense of the Vulture, you know, that's a Vulture. That's a character that has never really gotten his due. I have some great Vulture stories in my collection, but I think Michael Keaton hit it out of the park, man. Like he was great. Jake and I have both gone on the record multiple times on this podcast saying that Michael Keaton, up until probably Killmonger and Black Panther, was the best villain in the MCU. Yeah, I think so. I think that once once I was over Loki, because I just feel like
there's so much Loki.
Yeah,
dear
there's
Lord.
too much Loki, man. But once, yeah, you're right. Once the Vulture came around, Michael Keaton's Vulture, I really felt like this guy's menacing, man. When he tells him, I'll kill your whole family, like I'll kill your family. I was like, I believe him. He'll do it.
Don't mess with Michael Keaton and his gum.
Yeah, because he's been done wrong in the you see at the beginning of the movie, he's been done wrong. He sees the rich guys getting richer. Who can't relate to that? In a world where we see banks taking advantage of the little guy, and millionaires and billionaires like getting away with all kinds of things. Who can't relate to Michael Keaton's Vulture? Anyone can. So when you have that conversation between them two in the car, for me, that's my favorite scene. I mean, that's my favorite. There's no costumes. Again, I have this there's a thing with me with character moments, and there doesn't necessarily need to be costumes involved and superpowers, but I really believed him when he said, I'll kill your whole family. It's like,
it's going down.
It'll be easy because all he's got is his aunt, so you're not going to do a lot of work, man, but I believe you.
Rock on. All right, man. Take us through the rest of your list.
All right. Let's go with I think I don't even have to talk about this for very much because I think it's on most people's list. But The Dark Knight, right? I mean, everybody's got that on their list.
It's at the top. It bears no need for explanation because it's the friggin' Dark Knight.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, not just because for the obvious reasons of Heath Ledger's performance as his version of the Joker, but I mean, top to bottom, I mean, it's a really well done movie. It just happens to have a guy dressed up like a bat and a guy with makeup on his face. And who'd have known that when I first heard about the Joker in this version or this version of the Joker, and hearing that it was just paint, he just has makeup on his face, I was like, that's dumb, right? That's not the Joker. That's not the Joker, right? But then you see the movie and you realize that there is room for interpretation, and even things like that can be even more menacing. It's almost like he's choosing to look like a weirdo, right? It's not like a guy that got thrown into vat of chemicals. This is what he chooses to be and to look like, right? So, yeah, man, no explanation. That movie's awesome.
I do want to give just a quick shout out to one extra reason why I think The Dark Knight is so brilliant, because one, it's a perfectly conceived comic book movie. Yes, 100%. But just from a sheer cinematic standpoint, if we're just going to put on our cinephile hats and say, this is a movie that is going to be entertaining, but also for the highbrow crowd, I think it nails it, because I just think this is still remains one of the only times I've seen a single scene capture the perfect character representation of the two main characters in an action sequence with no dialogue. And I mean with that it's the semi chase scene in the middle of the night, right at the end of the second act of that movie, where the Joker turns over the semi, and after he's created all this anarchy, and he's walking down the middle of the street, and he's daring Batman to hit him with the motorcycle, and Batman won't.
Yeah.
And that entire sequence is a perfect representation of the anarchaic approach to life and organized crime that the Joker brings to society, and I'm following a strict code to do the right thing, a numbers approach of Batman are both representative in just the sheer action with absolutely no dialogue. And I just think that is a level of brilliant storytelling and action sequence constructing that we do not see in film very often, that I think sometimes gets glossed over because we're just used to saying that The Dark Knight is brilliant. But that movie is filled with countless moments like that. So it's like we have a true auteur of the cinematic craft who decided to take on a comic book movie, and he just melded the two together brilliantly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, man. You're absolutely enough said, man. You did it. Should I finish up right here?
Let's go for it, man. Top us off.
All right. So the last one on my list here is, again, this might be controversial, or it might not be, but X-Men Days of Future Past. I know a lot of people don't like the X-Men movies, or some of the X-Men movies, but I really enjoy that movie, and as a fan of the original of the source material, I really really enjoy the movie. I mean, they take some liberties. It's not Kitty Pryde going back in time. It's Wolverine. Of course, it's going to be Wolverine. But
that was literally going to be my first question to you, was about Kitty Pryde and Wolverine swap. Go on.
Yeah, but again, some of the great character moments in that movie. I mean, the moment that they're on the plane, right? They just broke Magneto out of prison. They're on the plane, and Beast is flying the plane, and then it's Charles and Eric having that first real conversation, and it leads to Charles lashing out at Eric because he feels that he was abandoned by him, right? But Eric's response, which was, and where were you, Charles? But I mean, Fassbender really brings it, man. Like, that's when I knew. I mean, I really enjoyed him in First Class, right? But I felt like he really got the character absolutely 100% right in Days of Future Past with his response of, where were you? We were brothers. We were supposed to do this together. We were supposed to protect our people. And that says everything about that character, that even though he's willing to do terrible, horrible things, he really does it for the good of his people. He feels like he's put on this earth for that reason alone. And it's hard to look at someone like him who is willing to make some murderous choices, but you can relate to him, and that's what makes him so interesting, right? That even though he is technically a villain, a bad guy, you can understand why he makes the choices that he makes, and the movie as a whole is great. There's so many good moments in that movie, but I really do love that character moment between those two characters, and then one later on, or one before, where I think Charles has a conversation with his older self. And when he tells him, we need you to hope again, which is, oh man, I remember tearing up watching that. And it kind of hit home at that time. I was going through a little rough spot, and I was feeling a little down in the dumps and stuff. But when I saw that moment between those two characters, which is the same character, man, it resonates with me till this day. I love that movie. All the superhero stuff is great, but at the end of the day, again, it's just it's a tight story. Everyone's on point. Everyone's doing their characters justice, and it ends so incredibly well.
I can't argue with that. I think this is hard for me, but I think that might be also my favorite X-Men movie of the series.
Okay.
And I really, man, I feel like, I don't know, I kind of want you to just start, keep talking about stuff you like, because man, you just I really agree with everything you're saying there. And it's, you mentioned Fassbender's performance, and it is rare that somebody redefines a character that Ian McKellen got his hands on. And Fassbender is so, man, he takes I didn't understand why we would recast Magneto. I was like, man, just de-age McKellen, put some makeup on him. I'll live with it. But Fassbender brings that character to life in a way that even Ian McKellen didn't. I'm really all in on that. Yeah,
he has a rage that is, that when he's not exploding and unleashing it, you can always feel it under the surface. There's a real subtlety to his performance, and I mean, I love the X-Men movies made me appreciate Magneto in a way that I hadn't previously. But I think, like you said, Fassbender's version of the character is Magneto. I hate to say that when you have someone like Sir Ian McKellen, defining the character from the beginning. But now I just feel like Fassbender's Magneto, and yeah, he's in every one of those movies. But I love watching him. I just love watching his Magneto.
Yeah, I fully.
I think
go ahead, Mitch.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I think Fassbender is one of the best working actors in Hollywood today. Just the sheer versatility of what he brings is unreal. And if he's going to be in a movie, he's going to take my money. He's officially reached that status. But I've just got to put in one little bit, and then you guys can nerd out on it. Cause I'm the outlier here. I have this working theory that Jake and I are going to do an episode on sometime in the near future called Apocalypse Order, where I take the X-Men movies, and it's kind of like Machete Order with the Star Wars movies, where you take the X-Men movies and jumble them in order and get rid of a couple, and you can actually get a better experience. And I'm sorry to say that Days of Future Past did not make the cut for me.
Okay.
Really?
But
Okay.
I will say that moment where Professor Charles is talking to younger Charles and drops that line of, just because someone stumbles and loses their path doesn't mean they're lost forever. Sometimes we all need a little help. Mm-hmm. That is one of the most single greatest moments in a comic book movie. Like, there's just that one scene is pretty powerful. So I will meet you there.
I understand the people who think that the X-Men films need to move past Xavier and Magneto, because we've had 6 movies focused on that relationship to one degree or another. And I understand when people give that criticism of the series and where it's at right now. But I guess I understand from a critical standpoint that Xavier and Magneto are to a certain extent outdated metaphors. I understand that in some ways they're an oversimplified look at things. I get all of the criticism. I understand the literary angle, the film angle. I get all the reasons why I'm wrong for thinking this, but I love X-Men, and at the core of X-Men to me is still Magneto and Xavier.
Yes, absolutely.
And the comics, I get all the reasons why they turn Magneto good every 10 years and they kill Xavier every 3 years. And I get these things, but at the end of the day, that series, whether it's in film, comics, cartoon, whatever form it might be, is at its strongest when Xavier and Magneto are like brothers who can't agree. And it just so happens the thing they can't agree on is a matter of life and death. And I love those characters so much.
Yeah, I love their relationship. I love the scene in First Class where he's trying to help Magneto tap into his true potential by not relying on his rage, but relying on something else, right? And when he brings up that memory of his mother, oh man, I was crying, dude. I still get teary-eyed watching this.
And it's so bad because you know where it's going to end. And that's what made that hurt so badly, is to sit there and think, I know the ending to this story, and that makes this break my heart even more. Yeah.
Because as much as you want for him to let go of the pain that he went through, the things that he's experienced, that he's never going to be able to do that. He's never going to be able to live past that trauma, and he's always going to pick rage over everything else. And you see it in Apocalypse, not a perfect movie. The character of Apocalypse was not done justice, but that moment when the townspeople come up to him and they realize that he's a mutant, and one of the guys accidentally shoots his wife and daughter, right? That moment when he's grabbing them and he's saying, not my babies, not my babies. Man, I already had my son at the time. And I could imagine that. Like, what would I do if I was holding my wife and my son in my arms and not being able to do anything about it? What would I do? What would I do if I had a mutant power that consisted of controlling metal? And then you get that question answered by Magneto. He takes everybody out with a chain or something that he had on?
Yeah, it was just that one. I'm right there with you. Fatherhood has made these things that I love so much harder sometimes. Like,
oh my gosh,
I'm on airplanes tearing up at films, and I'm like, I remember, I played a video game about rescuing your son 3 weeks after my first child, my son, was born, and it was Fallout 4, and I just remember sitting there being like, I normally play video games as the good guy, but swear to God, I'm going to burn this city down if any of you has my child. I know it's a digital child, but I will murder you all. And
yeah, man. I get it. I mean, it does really, it does really change the way you see things, because where the things that you put value on change once you see your first child be born, right?
Yeah.
It shifts everything. Everything shifts, man.
Yeah. And when you see these moments in these movies, right? Like those are things that hopefully you never experience, right? You to have your parents shot in front of you, in an alley. No one wants to experience that, obviously, but to see your wife and child killed in front of you, accidentally, however, it doesn't matter. I mean, but you can feel what it would be like to lose something that precious, right? And that's at the core. Those are the things that make these characters everlasting, right? Like when you see that moment in Batman Begins where all is lost, or at least Bruce Wayne thinks so, right? Where the Wayne Manor is burning to the ground, and he's in the elevator shaft with Alfred. And, there's that moment where he reminds him, what his dad always used to tell him, why do we fall? Right. Mm-hmm. That moment. Oh man, it's so awesome, dude, because he loves Bruce Wayne. He to him, that's his son. Like he helped to raise him, and all he wants is the best for him. He wants him to be able to move on past his trauma and be happy and have a family and do all that stuff. But he's not going to do any of that stuff right now. So he's helping him through his trauma by supporting this crazy idea of dressing up like a bat and becoming a vigilante, And so, I mean, I love the Michael Keaton Batman movies too, but there's something so earnest and human about the Christopher Nolan Bruce Wayne Batman, right? He's not as crazy, right? Which is fine. There's been different takes on Batman over the years, so I can totally buy it. And then you have, on the other hand, you have Ben Affleck, who is absolutely broken. He's the most Batman of any cinematic Batman. I mean, especially that scene where he's beating the hell out of everybody in that warehouse. I was like, okay, that's Batman, man. That's brutal. Dude, he's a broken dude.
I was publicly on the record as saying I was not pro Batfleck when he got cast, and then I was proven very wrong, and I'm grateful for that. Dude brought it. He completely brought chops to it.
Yeah.
I really hope he sticks with the Batman solo movie. I really want to see him do that.
Yeah,
well, this week he's still in. Next week maybe a different story.
Yeah,
depending on the Twitter profile we see.
Yeah, I think he's the kind of guy that loves. He got really used to being on top, once he started to direct. Like once he started to direct and be known as a great director, he went back to starring and to acting as well. He did The Town. It's his movie, but he's in it. And I think he liked the feeling of not being shit on by everybody, right? For once, people were looking at Ben Affleck and saying, I enjoy his stuff, And then he started doing these DC movies, and again, because they weren't at the caliber, or people were expecting Marvel, and they didn't get Marvel. Then he was on the other side. He was like, nobody likes me. Nobody likes what I'm doing. So why the hell should I do this? And I think that is part of why, he bowed out of directing. I think he got tired of what Warner Brothers was doing and meddling in all this stuff. I mean, yes, they're the money people and all that good stuff, but at the end of the day, let the creatives do what creatives do best. Maybe Zack Snyder's interpretation of these characters isn't 100% great, but it's a take, right? It's a take. It's just a moment in time of these characters. One day they will be redone all over again, and the next director or visionary will get to do it his way, right? But
and give me Zack Snyder over Joss Whedon any day. Joss Whedon was just here to ruin good things.
Oh man, and the thing is about Justice League is that to me it works like it really plays like an episode of Justice League Unlimited. Like it doesn't have the scale of what we're used to now. Like I think if this Justice League movie that we were given was given to us years ago before Avengers, that would have set the tone, right? That would have been
totally
looked
timing
at
is everything.
Absolutely. Every time I hear about what the Justice League movie could have been or what was shot but not used, I know that if they had just let him do what he needed to do, everything would have turned out okay. I mean, it's sad that his he had to go through the tragedy of losing his daughter, right? I'm sure that had a lot to do with what we ultimately got. But you're right, man. I mean, Joss Whedon, I feel like he did one good thing, which is the first Avengers movie, and I don't know what it is about him now, man. I see his name and I don't have confidence in him anymore. I just feel like
he's officially reached Michael Bay status for me, which is, can we just stop giving him budgets and can we stop going to see his movies and then maybe he'll just disappear?
Yeah. I kind of have to agree. I really felt bad for him after Age of Ultron because people were shitting on the guy so bad, right? And I felt bad for the guy. I went to see the movie. I didn't really enjoy it on the same on the level that I was hoping to enjoy it, but man, you could just tell how burned out he was and what a hard time he had with the movie. So I felt bad for him for that respect, but I didn't like what he did with Black Widow and the Hulk. I don't know where that came from. It's just out of nowhere. All of a sudden you create this relationship and I'm just supposed to believe it. You take a great character like Black Widow and then you totally screw her up. I'd never liked the Black Widow the way I did previous to watching Age of Ultron. So when people talk about, oh, we need a Black Widow movie, no, we don't. We really don't. We absolutely don't. And it's not because she's a woman superhero. It has nothing to do with that. It's just that character for me in the cinematic universe has been absolutely ruined. I have no interest in her. And, I was hoping she was going to turn into dust at the end of Infinity War. I was like, man, can we make that one permanent? That would be great. Thanks.
I find that perspective really interesting because Black Widow in the cinematic universe has been fascinating to me, the response she's gotten, because I'm with you where I don't dislike, like, I'm not so far as like I needed her to dust, but like I do keep looking at that response about we need a Black Widow solo movie, and I keep thinking that like I don't know that we do, because I don't know that there's enough depth in this version of the character and in this interpretation to really pull a solo feature out of. And maybe I'm being unfair to either writers or to Scarlett Johansson. I don't know, but like I don't mind the character necessarily, but I also am really puzzled by this desire to have her carry that banner for the female-led superhero movie in the Marvel universe. Right. Especially when you've got the upcoming storm of awesome that is Brie Larson as Captain Marvel. And I keep looking at like all the potential there. And then there's other characters. I mean, give me a She-Hulk movie, give me, oh gosh, there's so many characters in the Marvel, in Marvel's books that could easily carry that banner over the version of Black Widow that we've gotten. That I don't necessarily hate her, but I'm with you. I'm always really confused by that.
I think it's also a mixture of just the star power. I mean, Scarlett Johansson is, arguably the biggest movie star and most easily identifiable name and face in the Avengers lore, not named Robert Downey Jr. So there's also a little bit of weight with that too. But I mean, the Brie Larson Captain Marvel is going to usher in a new era, and it's going to be phenomenal. And I'm excited for that. That's just going to be friggin' amazing. But Dennis, my friend, brother, good soul, we are out of time, but we are so grateful that you stopped by to hang out with us and with our listeners for a little bit, man.
Dude,
this was legit.
Yeah, in all seriousness, this has been fantastic. And like I listeners are going to start noticing that for a little bit there, I dip out. I was having some technical issues, but like, I'm so excited to listen to this podcast and hear the parts that I missed, because this has been like the pinnacle for me so far in what we've done with this podcast. Like, just getting chat with you and get your perspective has been fantastic. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
Oh no, I'm happy to do it, man. I'm happy to talk comics. I love the art form of comics, and hopefully, if you guys would love to have me back, I would love to do it again. I would love to talk actual comics and stuff, right?
Oh, I vote yes.
For sure. We'll make that happen. We'll have you back. But
Awesome.
We've got some exciting news. Dennis has agreed to partner with us in a giveaway. He's got some art of his Sinister Six pieces that he's going to be letting us give away as a cool little thing. So be sure to check us out on Twitter and on Instagram to figure out how you can register for the giveaway and possibly be drawn to score that. But Dennis, do you want to give everybody one last shout out to where they can find you online?
Yeah, I'll make it real simple. Just look for me on Instagram as Tanoshiboy, at Tanoshiboy. That's TANOSHIBOY. It's awesome. It's probably the best way to get a hold of me, and I'm open to conversations about anything and everything, man. I love comics. I love comic movies. Anything geeky, I'm down. I mean, I'm approachable. Don't be afraid. I'm just like you. I love this stuff. So I'm happy to talk.
Yeah, and hit that Instagram, guys, because there's so much good stuff on there, and including these Sinister Six prints that, like, I am giddy that you're going to bless us with those to give away, because, like, when I was looking through your stuff, I was seriously like, oh my gosh, like, Dennis could be the regular artist on Spider-Man. Like, I would love, like, if Nick Spencer is looking for a regular contributor on his new series, like, this is your Sinister Six blew me away. Like, I'm
happy you think so. I'm nowhere at the level of today's comic book artists. I'm flattered that you would say so, but I love and respect comic book artists of any level, because the fact that they can not just draw these characters, but also the world that they inhabit, the buildings and the mailboxes, cars and all that stuff. I don't have that level of patience, but I can draw the characters that I love, when I get a chance here and there. So yeah, I'd be happy to gift those to someone who wins them. I hope they enjoy them.
Rock on. Well, thanks again for stopping by, Dennis. Again, check us out on watchingcomics.com. And if you are a follower on the iTunes, be sure to rate and review us, because it's the nice thing to do. We will be getting at you next week.